Connor, how's it going, man?
Oh, I'm doing all right. How are you, Devin?
Good. How's the weather out there? We had like a tornado warning and it was hailing in
Oh, geez.
Cincinnati.
No, it's 70 degrees and sunny here in Denver.
Well, I have no idea what the weather is right now because I'm in a basement underground, so I think it might the sun might be out.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows?
Best place for
All
a
right, let's get
tornado,
this
though,
started.
is in the basement.
Best place for a tornado. You're right, in the basement. All right, let's get this show rolling. Today we are going to be interviewing a very special guest, Brad Scoggin, co-founder and CEO of ArborXR.
He graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a bachelor's degree in business and economics, and he got his start in the arcade industry.
This is a really important episode, everybody. Please share it with your fellow educators or people in hospitals or people at colleges, because we're going to touch on some technical stuff. Brad gave us some really interesting insights into IT, the why behind managing multiple headsets, as you can see behind me on the wall, and what does that mean and why is it important and how do you do it? Very, very granular episode, and also lots of fun.
So, without further ado, we bring you Brad Scoggin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Immersive Medical Podcast. We are pleased to bring you today Brad Scoggin from ArborXR, CEO and co-founder. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing awesome. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good.
It's I'm in SoCal and it finally stopped raining after a month, so it's nice to see a little sun out the window.
I think
I'm in Cincinnati, and we had a tornado warning, and it was hailing earlier.
I'm in Colorado, and I think we got all of your rain, but then it turned into snow. I think
There you
Vail
go.
had like 24 inches in the last couple weeks.
Wow. Yeah, that's nuts.
Well, Brad, we're really pleased to have you here today. So on the Immersive Medical Podcast, we like to talk about all things immersive and all things medical and where they intersect. And today, you are kind of a special guest because you're ArborXR, which is an MDM. And I think a lot of people in this space who are the frontline end users in healthcare, in simulation, putting on VR goggles and trying to do immersive training or immersive medical stuff, they don't know what an MDM is, why we need it. So can you help us understand, what does MDM stand for, and what the heck is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So MDM is mobile device management, and
I mean, that makes me think of my cell phone. So is that not a cell phone thing?
yeah, no, that's what. So MDMs have been around for a few decades. Cell phones, tablets, laptops, and they're also, I guess, UEM, Unified Endpoint Manager, is another, I guess, name. And so, I mean, when you hear the name MDM or UEM and you think about cell phones and tablets, it kind of feels like what does that have to do with XR? And it kind of feels like, I don't know, boring, overly technical. And what we're doing in XR is not, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, I guess the quick history is that as cell phones and laptops and then tablets became a thing in the workplace, companies and or educational institutions needed a way to manage and control the devices. So where's the device located? What happens if the device gets stolen? What content is on the device? Who's using the device? So all kind of the boring behind the scenes stuff that's really important if you are an organization that owns hundreds or thousands of these devices, or millions in some cases. I mean, we work with some very large companies who use these, we call them legacy or traditional UEMs, to manage millions of devices.
Sure,
and
like
so,
Walmart or Delta or something like that.
Exactly. You can imagine when you have that many employees, how many devices you've got to manage. It's a big thing. Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what does this mean for a college that's got 50? Do they need an MDM as well?
Well, so when you shift to XR, I mean, what we think about with XR, and it's the pain we all face, is like you've got this beautiful new technology that is changing the way we learn, changing the way we train in ways that it's almost hard to imagine. And it's so forward thinking, it's so advanced, the hardware, the content, what you guys are doing. And then you have the implementation side. And it's like, oh, that part just didn't grow with the rest, right? Like, I mean, the friction points around deploying devices, pushing content, it's a pain in the butt. And we talk a lot about it being like a death by 1,000 cuts. And so you think about like an educational institution with 50 devices, and I would argue even 10. I think we had, somebody from MIT on our podcast, and I think they
listened to
found
that one. Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, they
we
did
don't know if anyone ever listens.
It was an artistic
Yeah, they ended up doing
thing.
like an opera, but their kind of aha moment was at 10 devices. So I think MDM, it's a boring old concept that's been around. But when you think about XR, what a university or what a high school wants to do is that they want to train their students in an easy way. And they may have 10 headsets, they may have 50 headsets, and they need an easy way to know where is the device. Some of the colleges we work with, they'll have a library that checks out devices. Sometimes each student has their own device. Other times there's a lab, right? You've seen all these different setups. Well, in any of those scenarios, you need to know where is the device, who has the device, what is the user accessing in the device, and you need to be able to push content to the device. So the way that I think about it, kind of for a non-technical, non-enterprise person, is that an MDM for XR, or an XRDM is what we call it, is really just a platform that helps you more easily and seamlessly deploy VR training. So you know where the headset's at, you can push content remotely, and then you can manage what happens inside the device. And I think one other thing I'll say is one of the we dog on the legacy MDMs a lot because we don't think they do a great job. And I think one of the things we think about too, for all of us, we're all excited and passionate about this new technology because we've seen the difference it can make. And I think one of the big challenges is that you have all these friction points. And so whether it's university or an enterprise, sometimes you've got one shot at presenting this to leadership, and it needs to go well. And you got that one shot at a first impression. And we see different orgs try to roll this out with one of these legacy solutions that don't really work, which we could talk more about or not. And then the whole pilot is shot, right? Because of the friction points. And so we're pretty adamant that you've got to have an XR specific MDM because it's just a baseline for being able to run an operation even at 10 devices.
So let me ask you, I guess, a simple question, which is, all right, so you're an institution, you have 10 headsets, XR, that's what XR devices means, right? So that's either an AR or a VR headset. XR is like that crossover of these types of headsets behind me. If you're only listening, check over the YouTube channel. You can see a bunch of VR headsets behind my head and a HoloLens over here. So there's your XR, right? What does it mean for an institution who may have 10 of them but doesn't have an MDM? What does that look like? You listed a bunch of features.
Yeah, it's death by 1,000 cuts. I think one of the biggest ones, maybe where I'll start, is on the content side. And I think that is something that's unique about VR and AR specifically versus cell phones and tablets. Because right now, as we both know, VR, AR in education and enterprise is almost exclusively used for training. And so the content is everything. And you've got these huge files. You're often updating the content on a regular basis. And so without an MDM, you are plugging in a device one at a time to install content. So it's not even over the air. Sometimes if maybe you have a legacy solution, you can do it over the air, but the only way to know if the content is being downloaded is to put the headset on your face. And I always use that example because you think, okay, is it that big of a deal to go put the headset on your face and see, is this downloaded? Did it stall? Did it delay? No, it's really not. But if you're doing that across 5 headsets, 10 headsets, 50 headsets, it becomes kind of annoying. And if that's one
repetitive.
Yeah, it's very repetitive. And then, oh no, which one of the 50 didn't finish? Okay, was this one? Was it that one? And that's just one of maybe 20 or 30 different little pain points. Another one is that you have no idea where the device is. So you check out a device to the student, the device leaves, and who knows? Does it come back? Does it not come back? There's no way to control what that user is doing in the device, which you may want to lock. I mean, especially if it's in primary education, you don't want students going off in all sorts of things in VR. And then another big one is just remote view, right? So having the ability for the instructor to see what the student is doing inside the headset.
So you can log in, open your laptop, and you've got 10 students with an XR device on, like a HTC XR Elite or something like that. And they're all in it. On the laptop, you can actually see what the students see live.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's not casting. That's different, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we call it remote view, but you can see exactly where they're at, and so you can guide them through the experience, which is important, specifically in education. More so that maybe than in the enterprise space. But when you have students that you're trying to orient to a piece of content, super helpful.
especially in
And
this new industry that people aren't necessarily familiar with. You know, we've been to trade shows
Exactly.
for VR
Exactly.
patients and having to walk people through, this is how you use a VR headset, let alone how to use our platform. This is how you use
Totally.
a VR headset specifically.
Right. Exactly.
yeah, and I think when people tackle this industry on the customer side, right, they're like, we are going to become a VR institution. We're going to have immersive technologies at our hospital or at our college. I don't think a lot of people understand exactly how many pieces to the puzzle there are to this. It's not just about buying some software and downloading it,
Right.
because you have to decide, well, what device is that software going to go onto? Once you have that, you have a separate piece of, so how do I control these devices then? For example, what if one walks off campus because someone's like, cool, a VR headset, I'm going to take this. So I'd like to share with you a story that might speak to some of our listeners. It's a true story. And it just happened, I think about a year ago or something like that. And it's with a college that I used to work with. And effectively, they worked really hard on their grant funds to secure the appropriate amount of funds to purchase headsets. They ended up getting 50 headsets that arrived. And they don't have an MDM. The reason that they don't have an MDM is because previously they had an MDM for their iPads at the college. And a whole case of iPads walked off campus during COVID because like campuses were shut down. But there was someone, right? There was some employee who had a key card, walked into a room, saw a bunch of iPads, picked them up, walked out. Now, all of those iPads were on an MDM. But unfortunately, it wasn't ArborXR. Unfortunately, that MDM was, I guess, a light MDM. And there wasn't a lot of recourse for the college to do. Like, they couldn't shut them down remotely, or they had a hard time tracking them and finding them. It just didn't feel as secure. So fast forward now to climbing this hill and pushing a snowball up a hill to get funding for new virtual reality simulation for all their medical professionals in their workforce development programs and their allied health programs. And they are hesitant to do an MDM.
Interesting.
How do you receive that story? What does that mean to you when you think about those types of things? Is it the same type of MDM as you would see on an iPad?
I mean, in some ways, I guess. I mean, I think the thing about Arbor is that we've built it specifically for AR, VR devices. I think one of the, it's hard for me to think about. I mean, to me, security is like par for the course with MDM. So to not have the ability to track the device or remote wipe the device seems kind of nuts, even if it's a super light MDM. I think what we have seen maybe more often is that these MDMs, because they're 2 decades old, and you can understand, they came out 2 decades ago with a certain feature set, and for 2 decades, they've added feature after feature. So I think that's more of the challenge, is that if you're going to try to navigate one of these legacy solutions, there's endless features. And it may, it's difficult to know what applies to your device, what doesn't, especially if you're trying to use an XR device on one of these legacy solutions, because most of the features don't work. So to me, the way I think about it, the way I would talk to the college is like, okay, security is like 101. I think you should have an MDM for security, absolutely. But I think where you're really going to see the benefit is in the day-to-day. Whoever is actually managing these headsets, if they don't have an MDM, they're going to be pulling their hair out. Back to what we said a few minutes ago. And it's every time you want to update content or put new content on those devices, if you want to have any sort of restriction on what the student is getting into in VR, to me, that's where it shines more than, and it's just the way I think. It's like, okay, security, yeah, of course. But on a day-to-day, I think that's where people find the most value.
Interesting. Okay. Brad, how do you get into this? I can't imagine 5-year-old Brad sitting there coloring in his coloring book, imagining that he's going to co-found an MDM for XR headsets. Was this a dorm room idea? Did it stem from a problem that you and your co-founders encountered that you wanted to solve? Where did it come from?
Yeah, it is funny that like MDM, and even think about me when my friends ask me what I do, right? Like MDM is really boring. right? Let's just say like that whole concept is like MDM. Like you're in VR. It's the future of all technology. It's AI and VR, and you're in MDM. Like that's the most boring part. Now I look at it and say, well, maybe it's the most important part from my perspective. Obviously, I'm biased. But yeah, that's a great point. So I mean, I guess our kind of quick backstory is that it was a problem that we just kept solving problems. I was actually in the nonprofit space for several years ahead of this, and during that time, for me, we were doing some work in Latin America. I got to work with a really cool organization that was seeing this change at this huge level, and it did so many things in me during that time in my life. And one of the things was, there's two key things. One is that it is possible to bring change at a high level in a really hard environment, which is encouraging. Just think about that. You're in these really harsh environments and you're seeing massive change. So that's encouraging. Okay, change can happen. But two, it's really, really inefficient to try to reform. We were in the education space, and reform maybe is too strong of a word, but trying to reform a broken legacy system just in general in the world is challenging. It's very inefficient. And so for me, kind of this idealistic seed got planted of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could be a part of a new system being built, a new technology, a new system, whatever it may be, from the beginning. And maybe I could be one of the people that help build it the right way, so that 20 years from now or 2 generations from now, everyone's not saying, oh no, we weren't thinking about this, we didn't build it the right way. And so that was, in a weird way, the genesis. So we moved out to Southern California. I'm from Oklahoma originally, and my wife's a physician. She started at a practice out here. And so I stepped out of the nonprofit and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Maybe I can go find something that I can scratch this kind of idealistic itch that had been growing over the years. And so I was actually in the process of starting another company and went back to Oklahoma to raise money for that company because I didn't know anybody in California. And I went to my now co-founder's house. He said, hey, you got to come check out VR. So this is 2016. And, I'm 30.
Was that Will?
It was Will. Will is Will had a headset for the first, he's always on the cutting edge of stuff.
The innovator.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm 38 and I grew up playing video games and was somewhat in technology, but I had kids. And I just hadn't been keeping up with it. So I go to Will's house, try on the headset, and I'm like, holy cow, like this is really good. This is just an HTC Vive plugged into, a gaming PC. And I think my first experience was Zombie Training Simulator, which isn't even like great.
That's a good experience though. That's a good CPU.
Yeah, it was a great oh wow, this is really, really real. And if you can rewind to 2016, and I'm coming out of the nonprofit, so I'm thinking, okay, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to be part of something new. So gaming, as much as I love gaming, and I would joke about doing something in gaming as a kid, I'm not thinking about gaming. But the technology was so good, and there were some applications in healthcare education then that it was like, you know what, there's a moment, forget the other thing, let's get into VR. And so 6 weeks later, we opened up one of the first VR arcades in North America. That was the whole thing was like, we just need an entry point, just get in somewhere. And if we get in and do a good job, maybe we could be a part of helping shape this industry. Again, super idealistic. So yeah, I mean, the short version is we launched the arcade. We realized there was no software to run a VR business at all. And so you say MDM, mobile device management, they weren't mobile at the time, right? But you still had to manage devices, content, and users. And so we had this basic software built and we pushed hard into that. The arcades just started popping up all over the world. The timing was just right. And so we became kind of the leader in that space, which was a very small space, and just kept solving problems. And I think you look back when you're running a company, and we, now, and after you do some research, like, oh, the problem space, that's important. Stay close to the customer. That's important. But we just did it out because we didn't know what else to do, right? Like we started a company, we raised money. We're trying I don't know. What do we build? Well, let's go ask the customers. What's the problem? Like we need to figure out what the problem is. We need to make sure we're solving that problem. And so it's just evolved over the years. And I guess it was beginning of 21, we were able to pivot into what we do now, which is really XR, mobile XR devices. And so that's what we've been doing the last 3 years. Yeah.
Thank you, Qualcomm, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, and it's funny, we tried, another thing we learned over those years is the gaming space was great. And I was telling somebody actually just yesterday that it was so fun to see people try VR for the first time at scale. And it's typically kids. Like they come into an arcade, they're with their parents, they put on a headset and they come, oh my gosh, so you see this over and over and over again, which was awesome. But we wanted so badly to see that technology move into enterprise and education, into more meaningful applications. And so we did so many pilots with different large groups, and it was just, we couldn't force it. It was not until the cord got cut that it's like, okay, this can happen. So yeah, anyway, it wasn't a dorm room idea. The only part that I joked about as a kid is I think I did joke about wanting to have an arcade. And you can imagine too, we college degrees, we all had real jobs. We tell our friends and our parents, oh, we're starting a VR arcade. They're like, yeah, okay, good luck with that.
So we love talking about big problems here. I'm going to bring up our true north big problem. The World Health Organization is now saying a shortage of 10 million frontline healthcare workers by 2030, which used to be 7 years away.
Wow.
It is now 6 years away.
Yeah.
At the same time, people are aging out 65 plus really fast. So in 10 years, the hospital is not a place I'm going to want to be. The solution, no matter how many times we slice it, seems to be education. You have to produce more healthcare workers. You can't just make the existing workforce more effective because they're overworked, right? If you've got a nurse and I'm hoping they're not 16 to 1 like they were during the pandemic, but if you've got a nurse that's supposed to be 4 to 1 with their patient ratio, and now they're 8 or 10 to 1,
right?
I don't know how much of VR training is going to make them really efficient to run faster to each room. She or he needs another nurse. We need more frontline healthcare workers. What do you see ArborXR's or MDM's role in helping solve that large healthcare crisis, which, I mean, it's here. They're just saying it's going to be at 10 million in 6 years.
Right.
Hey, Connor, are you finding it challenging to organize asynchronous clinical education for all your students?
Devin, I don't have any students.
Well, that's okay, because no matter the class size, from 10 to 10,000 students, we have the perfect solution for you.
VR Patients isn't just a virtual reality platform. It's an asynchronous learning tool, which means students can access it anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. They can jump into a VR simulation from their VR headset or even from their web browser. Clinical competency training doesn't have to be confined to a specific schedule or location anymore.
To learn more about how VR Patients can make learning more accessible and scalable, head over to vrpatients.com. That's vrpatients.com.
And if you don't have any students just like Connor, but you do have a VR headset, you can try it right now for free on the MetaQuest Store or Steam.
Yeah, man, those are powerful numbers. I mean, I think about at a just core foundational level for us, our role in all of this is to remove the friction. Yeah. I think the way we look at it, I'm sure the way you look at it is there's no longer a question about the efficacy of the training. Like it's to me, it's now black and white. We've seen enough examples. You read this, you read the stats, you read the studies, but we also work with a lot of companies. And so we hear kind of behind the scenes numbers, and it's just, there's no question. People learn faster. People retain more information. The accessibility, which I always think that's a fun one. I think sometimes we forget about, maybe not specifically what you're doing, but we hear a lot because we work a lot in enterprise that people get excited about training faster and retaining more information. Amazing. Yeah. I think the accessibility of doing it in your living room, or you think about a third world country, or, it's just, you can spin that out pretty quick. And all of a sudden, wow, education training is democratized in a way that it never has been before.
Equity and access. Yes. You're 100%. The nurse who is at a community college in a rural Oklahoma should receive the same level of training as the Harvard nurse. Exactly. And you can do that with a democratized headset.
100%. And I think that part of it, just as a side, I don't think that gets pushed on enough. I think, everyone's so focused on the ROI to get the next step in the pilot. And sometimes it's maybe hard to measure the ROI of accessibility. It's a longer term price, metric. But so we look at, there's no question that this is happening and that it's super effective. But the reality is, and we went through a lot of them, there's still so many really annoying, and they're annoying. The friction points are annoying because it's like they shouldn't exist. And because, Connor, your question, I think earlier, it's like we're comparing this subconsciously or consciously to how we interact with our cell phones. And that's an industry that's so much more mature. And so we're just so used to, like, it just works, right? You can access the content. And so it's just, I think it's extra frustrating for people. And so I think the role that we play And we really try to have this DNA kind of as a river guide. We want to help guide customers along the journey, but very practically and at scale, we want to remove the friction. We want to make it easier to put on a headset. We want to make it easier to provision 10 headsets or 10,000 headsets. Once they're provisioned, we want to make it easier to push the content. And I think, for us, and selfishly, the annoyance of all this is an incredible opportunity, because I just think it is so important. And there's a lot of emphasis already out there on content and hardware. Obviously, you have to have those. But if you don't have a smooth kind of platform foundation to run it on, then you're going to hit a wall.
Brad, can we've talked about friction points. You've mentioned them a couple of times. Can you name a couple friction points that are kind of big in your industry?
Yeah,
that you're trying to hurdle over, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think initial provisioning is a huge one. And again,
can you define provisioning for our
yeah,
listeners?
Sure. So getting the headset set up, and
Sure.
I mean, so the headset shows up in your office, or wherever it shows up, and you got this awesome headset, and you maybe have purchased some content, or you're planning to purchase content. Well, how do you go from headset in the box to a headset that's ready to use? And again, we're used to our cell phone, and it's just basically there and ready to roll, right? It's so intuitive, and it's not that way with VR. And so that initial getting the device set up, especially if you are in a very specific friction point, and it's in education, I think it's probably more of an issue in enterprise, but is the Wi-Fi certificates, right? Like, because of the security. So getting onto Wi-Fi and getting onto Wi-Fi the right way is a big challenge. So everything that has to do with getting the headset set up initially, and again, if it's one or two headsets, it's not a big deal. You can do it yourself. But when you're thinking about scale, and I think, to your question a second ago, Devin, like what role do we play? Like, all we think about is scale. Like, the way we solve a 10 million nurse crisis is not by thinking. We got to think, how does this go to scale? How does everyone in every state or wherever, that wants to do nurse training, how do they do it in their house? How is it super easy? How is it super accessible? You've got to think about doing it at scale. And so the initial provisioning is a big friction point, and there's so many sub bullets. It's getting an MDM onto the headset. It's getting the content onto the headset. It's getting the Wi-Fi set up on the headset, et cetera, et cetera. And then, another big one, and this goes into even the difference in how cell phones and tablets are supported versus XR devices. So cell phones and tablets, for the most part, are a version of Android called Android Enterprise. All of the VR AR headsets are Android open source. So the legacy MDMs, they're built to support the Android Enterprise, not Android open source. And the reason that all that matters in a practical way is that Android Enterprise has access to the Google mobile services, or Google Play Store. So again, it's all there, right? You get the content through the store. It's no big deal. Once again, in VR, that doesn't exist. And content is is everything. It's bigger files. And so pushing content, updating content, knowing when content is downloaded, and I say this, I'll say this again and again. That sounds like, okay, that's like one thing. It's not that big of a deal, but it is a huge deal. And if that because you're in the space, that when you're deploying even a few headsets, that managing the content properly and making sure the right content is on the right headset and the right version, it's a massive annoyance, right?
It's why we're having the conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So
absolutely.
Those are a few, some of the security stuff, again, I think that's like par for the course. That's not sexy at all, but it's important. And then managing what that user sees in the device, I think is important, especially in an education setting.
It's very interesting. The security is par for the course. Because, well, first of all, I agree with you, but I think from the consumer's end, sometimes that's the biggest concern, because it's this new device connecting to their networks, and sometimes it's connected to Facebook or Meta, and they're like, whoa, there's a store and a credit card attached to this. Security. And then what gets left out is the challenges or friction points around content and, well, what's on it and how you can control that.
Brad, do you think one of the friction points you mentioned was just not understanding how to set it up, or having to go through that setup process? Do you think that's going to be alleviated a little bit with something like the Apple Vision Pro, this new big headset, a lot of news around it, but made by Apple, who I think in the US, almost 60% of people use iPhones. Do you think familiarity with the software will alleviate that friction point specifically?
I do, but I think the one thing to think about, and I think about even the way that Meta is approaching the market, I don't think that Meta said this, and I think Apple will approach it in a similar way, is Meta has, my take, I think, is that Meta wants a one-to-one world, one device to one user. And that's one thing we haven't talked about. Like, and maybe that's your case, more true with what you guys are doing specifically, but a lot of the world today is not one-to-one. Most of it is one device shared by many people.
Right.
And so if you're thinking about a device that you as a consumer buy, then going through the Apple setup flow, like, okay, that's no problem. It's you setting up your device, and there's an expectation, even if the flow on your iPhone is simple, like, it's going to take you whatever, 10 or 15 minutes to set up your new phone, you're fine with that. That's, so I think in that world, it's not a big deal. I think even though with Apple's improved setup flow, when you're thinking about an enterprise or an education setting where you've got, it's you setting up 50 devices or 500 devices or 5,000 devices, you got different Wi-Fi, you got different groups, like what different groups get different content, like that challenge still exists, right? And that's where even Apple devices use MDMs, because that's where the MDM comes in, is really, it's managing the enterprise or the education use case at scale. And so I think the issue today is not necessarily that a Pico headset, if I just shipped one to you, Connor, that it would be difficult for you to set up. Like, it wouldn't be. You'd pipe in the Wi-Fi at your office or your house. You'd put on the content you want. That's not a big deal. It's about any type of scale. And it's about, even the security thing, I kind of keep downplaying, and maybe I shouldn't. I mean, it's about being able to see all those devices in one place. And it's about being able to remote wipe them to see where they're located. And that either that VR champion or the L&D leader, whoever's running that program, to have control and visibility on the devices. And I think that's where, the MDM will always come into play.
The Apple Vision Pro seems cost prohibitive. Maybe it's not. I mean, the HoloLens is a $3,000 device, right? And the Apple Vision Pro is approaching $4,000. Is that device going to be on ArborXR? Like, is there a need for that device to be on ArborXR on an MDM?
Yeah, I think it will eventually. I mean, the way we approach the market is very much, we're really tight with our customers. And I mean, we've got almost 100 of the Fortune 500 Global 2000. So we're some really big clients. And so as they have need, as we, it's hype and it's exciting and it's a great device, but until there's real need, I don't think it's something that we'll support. I do think it's interesting to think about, the mixed reality, part of that is exciting and cool, but we still see so much of the use case today, as much as everybody's even talked about AR for years. And there's so many awesome AR use cases, right? And it honestly is sad sometimes that they aren't more pervasive because they're so powerful. But the reality is today, where XR is having its moment is in training, just straight up training. It's putting someone in an environment and letting them repeat the task over and over again. And so I think until that shifts, Apple's cool and there's going to be some use cases for it, but at scale and where the real ROI is, to be able to justify the cost. Now, the other interesting thing, I heard someone else say this, and maybe this is common knowledge. I hadn't thought about this, but I guess, pre-iPhone, people weren't buying iPhones for their employees either. And then iPhone comes out, it's so expensive, but all the execs like the iPhone. And so the execs buy the iPhones, and then it comes top down. So it'd be interesting to see if it plays out. You've got to assume
it's
that Apple's coming
symbol.
out with an SE. Yeah, totally. Maybe it was you said, somebody said a while back, and I think this is one of my best takes that I've heard, that the biggest thing that this first edition of the Apple headset will do, it's got to be you, is make it cool. Katie's going to have it on his backpack. You're going to see somebody at Starbucks.
Yeah. I said, you're going to see someone in a coffee shop wearing a headset.
Yes. I quote you all the time on that. I forgot it was you. As I'm saying, I'm like,
thanks, honey.
Devin. Yeah, but I think that honestly is the biggest thing that this initial. I mean, imagine you see KD walking into a game and it's on his backpack on ESPN. All of a sudden, it's next level, right? Like it's a status symbol, like you said.
You know what though? It's the whole face of it's glass. So even on a scale enterprise level, I can't even imagine a college or a hospital spending $4,000 a headset, $3,500 a headset, handing out 100 of them, and like they all drop one time. And it's like, well, that's broken.
Right. Well, and I mean, even on the other side, just simply like, you don't have to spend $4,000 if you want to.
You don't have to spend $4,000. You're right.
For what the hospital or the education institution wants to accomplish, you can spend $800, $400, right? And
you're right.
So.
And you're solving friction pain points on the setup end, on the provisioning end.
Right.
And I think it's a perfect segue, Connor. You have a cell phone provider entering the market. Are they going to solve the front end pain points, friction points? But HTC's been around building headsets. That's 5, right? HTC 5. They build headsets. I'm sorry, they build cell phones and deploy those, and they haven't solved this friction point necessarily of setup. They're just providing a solid piece of hardware, whereas the Metas of the world are providing phenomenal piece of hardware. It just has I don't want to say unfortunate. It's just can be a challenge that it's connected to this ad space of social media, this headset, which I understand that business model. But when you produce an affordable, cost-effective, drop-safe headset that's perfect for enterprise training, you want it to not come with a lot of the social networking side of it. Same thing with the end user. They don't want the credit cards and social media in their hospitals and in their colleges. They want to just get to business. They got work to do. They got students to train or healthcare workers to train.
Totally.
Well, I got a quick question for you. Talking about all of this friction, do you have an example of a win, a positive customer win or story of friction solved or problem solved on the scale enterprise level?
Yeah, we should have started there, right? Instead of starting with all the negative. Man, so many. One, just to keep it in the healthcare space, there's kind of two. Healthcare is unique because VR is actually being used for therapy, which I think is really cool. And a lot of, everywhere else, it's some version of training. But I know that we have, so a couple examples. One of our mutual customers, I think, they're training paramedics, and I think they've reduced the time it takes to go from a base paramedic to a team lead by like 70 hours, which is cool. And again, you multiply that across X number, that's a lot of savings. I think they've also, same customer has reduced the training of a cohort of like 20 students by like 1,300 hours. Okay, that's even more significant. So there's some pretty powerful improvements just in the time it takes to upskill or to train. But I think what the VA is doing with VR and actually using it with patients is super impressive. And so a couple stats from VA. One, and I think this is important, we haven't touched on this at all, but you got to think the VA, so the Veterans, I think it's actually the VHA, Veterans Healthcare Administration, right? So it's treating our veterans. So it's typically, not always, but it's typically an older population. And one of the stats that they report is that 95% of their users want to do VR again, which I think that's not unimportant. An older population who says, yes, I like this, right? But what's more powerful are some of the results they're getting. I think they've talked about, in some instances, totally curing phantom pain, which is nuts, right? You think about somebody who's felt like they've had a clenched fist for 5 years. All of a sudden you put on a headset and you see your hand open in VR and that phantom pain goes away. But some of the stats they've reported, after one time in VR, a reduction in pain by 30%, which is pretty wild. And then anxiety being reduced by 85%. So I think after one time, right? That's you think about the epidemic of anxiety in our world today, and you can do it in 85. And what's interesting too, to me, is that it still all goes back to it's learning, right? Like it's changing the way the brain, and that's like the foundation of all of this is VR's ability to change the way we think in a positive way. And whether that's learning how to be a nurse quicker and more effectively and more efficiently, or it's actually improving someone's quality of life with pain reduction or anxiety. It's crazy. And it's last thing I'll say is too on that. Sorry, I get excited about this. That, right? Like it's that stat, and that's one of hundreds, maybe thousands of stats, but it's stats like that it's like this is happening. Like there's no question, right? Like VR is going to change the world, and we all get to be part of it, which is really, really exciting.
To be part of it. Well, and your wife's a physician, and that's a really inexpensive prescription that doesn't have any addictive properties.
Totally.
That is pain management, right? That
100%.
will have forever future use cases. Well, I'm sure each device is going to recycle every 3 to 5 years. You're going to need to upgrade, but the content that is on it will continue to serve your potential health needs, your potential simulation training needs.
Yep.
That is super
one
exciting.
One device could serve a family too, right? So,
absolutely. I took the XR Elite to a dentist appointment. I freaked out the dentist, but I put it on, and while he was, scratching my teeth and whatever the
Yeah.
cleaning, which is just not fun for me. It's not fun for anyone. I was
No.
watching YouTube videos on the ceiling.
That's awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Um,
There's at least one. I think one of the companies we work with is specifically focusing on like
Mind
reducing-
VR.
Well, Mind VR, but there's another one that's specifically focusing on the dental office. Maybe Mind VR.
Oh,
may do that
really?
some. Yeah, specifically in the dental office. Which my dad's a dentist. He's a professor now. So the dental thing, I grew up in a dental office basically.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but even when your dad's a dentist, you still don't like going, right? Like nobody, like
That's
you
so
said.
Right.
That's so weird. My dad makes teeth for dentists for a living. He owns
Oh,
a
really?
dental office. Yeah, he owns it. Yeah,
That's
we have a
funny.
lot in
Well,
common, Brad. That's weird.
Take it one more. I just found this out. I don't know if this will make us feel better or worse, but and maybe this again was common knowledge. I did not know that Mark Zuckerberg's dad is also a dentist. Did you know
What
that?
is happening right now?
Crazy, right?
Connor, do you have any dentist in your family?
Not even a little bit. Hey, Devin, I keep hearing about competency-based education from nurses online. What is that? Can you break that down for me?
Oh, yeah, sure thing. Do you know anything about cooking?
Yeah, I'm actually sous videing a couple steaks for tonight right now.
Oh. Okay, well then, so in cooking, chefs follow recipes but often adjust ingredients and cooking times based on taste and experience. So in competency-based education, it's similar. It's about understanding the core objectives or the recipe and adjusting teaching methods, ingredients, and times based on student progress and feedback.
Got it. So like being able to tailor a VR sim to the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And VR Patience serves as your kitchen, equipped with all the tools you need to cook up the perfect learning experience.
Okay, so if I really wanted to tackle CBE in my nursing school, I should go to vrpatience.com and book a demo?
That's right. Visit vrpatience.com and start your sous videing today. I can't believe you know what sous videing is. I have no idea what that is. We got to talk about that another day.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, we are going to start wrapping up here pretty soon. I've got the future prediction question for you. You are eyeball deep, your teeth deep in this industry. What do you think the hardware is going to look like in 5 to 10 years? What kind of hardware is ArborXR going to need to be able to support, like form factor wise, in 5 to 10 years? And I'll just give you an example. Like Meta puts out these little news broadcasts or these PR leaks about these glasses that are just the best technology the world's ever seen, but they're just too expensive to produce. So they're keeping them behind closed doors. And it's a great PR extravaganza for them. But what do you have any insights into what's XR going to look like in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think maybe a handful of quick thoughts. Like I hope that AR really does get going. And you think about, and maybe it becomes more MR than AR, but you think about how that can really fundamentally change the way we all live when there's now.
So can you define those acronyms really quick for the audience?
Yep. Yeah. So AR, augmented reality, and think about a digital overlay on your world. The example I like to use, one of our customers, they have an application that allows doctors to put a digital. So they have glasses that look just like Devin's normal glasses. You can see through the glasses. You're not immersed. And a doctor can actually put a digital overlay of an MRI on a patient while they're working on the patient. So that's augmented reality AR. And you think about that, like, wow, that's really cool. How does that translate? We've seen the videos. You walk down the grocery store aisles and you can see the nutrition facts. You see recipes and all that. So I hope.
Or Google wayfinding. But what about MR? You said, what's MR?
Yeah, so mixed reality. And I think that's mixed reality is when you're taking the digital world into the real world. Is that a good way? Was that how you would describe it? So you're putting furniture in your living room that you might purchase, right? And you start to think about all the applications there. It does seem like that's getting a little more heat right now. Go ahead.
Sure. I know we're now going right into like the definitions and semantics a little bit, but where does spatial fit into all of this? Apple came in hot with it's all about spatial now.
Yeah, but it feels to me like that's just a positioning thing, right? Like they don't want to be positioned as a VR headset. And so, I mean, what is
they
spatial,
totally
right?
are a VR
it's
headset.
MR, right? Like
they're just cameras are on. Yeah.
No, it's a spatial computer.
Sorry.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what they call it.
So I think I hope AR gets some more traction, but I might push the other way. I think what I'm more excited or hopeful for the cool glasses that are light and work, amazing. That just feels like it's still a really long ways away. I mean, if you really think about how far we've come in this last 7 years, it's pretty far, but I think we all thought we would be further along for the last 10 years, maybe. I think what's more exciting is that like we haven't yet, like the current form factor to some extent, I think is just fine in a training environment. And you only need that super lightweight, anyone can wear it if you're, when you're moving beyond beyond training. So what I hope is that more of the world is actually experiencing the power of just training and learning in VR. And I think that can be done with a very basic. So my hope is that more companies like Lenovo, who are enterprise first, who have the chops to push out globally and they have the relationships. I want to see more companies like that come into the space with just a basic headset. And it's not even about the headset. It's about your content. And now we're seeing, it's not just these bits and pieces of these super powerful stories. It's like, oh, this whole state, this whole country, this whole school system now is scoring better across the board because of the way they're able to learn. So I think that's what I'm more excited about is just the basic headset being more pervasive.
To give people a little visual of what we're talking about here, I just grabbed 2 headsets off the wall. So if you're listening, pop on over to the YouTube channel. This is a Quest 1. Right? This was the first wireless Quest, not the Quest Go, but this is the Quest 1, 2019. And then here's the Quest 3, right? Which is a year old, not even 6 months old. And it's 2024. So you're looking at 5 years about, and look at the form factor.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot going on under the hood in this that's not going on under the hood in this one. But like you're saying, it's not glasses.
Right. It's
not
even close.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. So I agree with you that maybe this is the end game, right? What I'm wearing on my face is the end game.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're 5 years out from that one yet.
No, I don't think
unless the new AI developer, right, with the release of GPT-5, which, by the way, the first AI software developer is named Devin. I can't take credit for that, but I think that's pretty cool. And unless they do something, right, unless that AI entity figures out a hack, we're stuck with what we can squeeze into plastic, what we can squeeze into square boxes.
Yeah, agreed. But I don't think it diminishes the power of it. I think that's the thing,
absolutely
right?
not.
Like it's not. We don't have to have glasses for this to be exciting.
100%.
Well said. Well, we are just about out of time, so we are going to segue over to our lightning round. Brad, lightning round has nothing to do with anything that we talked about prior. They're very light questions, just quick, just getting to know you a little bit better.
Yeah. What's the meaning of life? No, I'm just kidding.
What is good?
So we'll start out with a super easy one. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
What is your favorite way to unwind after work?
Working out, lifting.
He didn't say put on a VR headset. Interesting.
If you could have any superpower, what would you have?
Oh goodness, flying.
Yeah,
a
I'm
good
right
one.
there with you. History or time travel?
Oh, you cut out. Say that again.
I guess those are kind of similar. If you could travel to any time frame, where would you go to?
Oh man, I don't even know. I gotta think for a second. I know it's lightning round.
That's all right.
I think I like to give thoughtful answers though. I think it would be cool to be around the pyramids when they were like actually being used and what was going. There's so much mystery around that. I want to go back and see like, what was actually going down.
I feel like if you traveled back to that time, you would watch them and be like, "Oh, well, man, that makes perfect sense."
Yeah, right, exactly.
Today,
I
we're
think
like,
the same thing. Like, oh yeah, it wasn't really that complicated. Like,
Yeah.
What's your favorite sports team?
The Dallas Cowboys. I'm from Oklahoma. My dad grew up in Texas, so I'm a pretty hardcore Cowboys fan.
Right on. I'm a big fan of Emmitt Smith, but that's about the last time I was a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, well, that's the last time it was good to be a Cowboys fan.
Yeah. All right. Closing question. What would you say to educators who are looking to do training at scale, and they want to enter this market. Do you have any advice for them? Their first steps into how do I tackle this XR market at scale for my simulation needs, my training needs?
Yeah, I think what we've seen work in multiple verticals is I think start small, start simple, and like get a win. Like for your world, find out the easiest, fastest way to get a win. It's going to encourage you as the one running it. It's going to encourage the leadership. It's going to encourage the participants. And there's so much out there that you'll be able to take that to the next step. But I think figure out the easiest, fastest, simplest way to get a win.
I love it. Well, there you go, folks.
And then use ArborXR as your MDM.
Yeah, that's right.
Where can people find you if they want to follow you, your ideas, your thought leadership?
LinkedIn is probably the best place.
All right, so look for Brad Scoggin or ArborXR on LinkedIn, and thank you very much for the conversation. I had a great time.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out, Brad.
Hey, Connor, have you caught wind of the latest whispers about VR patients?
Whispers? No. What's going on?
Well, apparently they're building a new feature that's tailored specifically for nursing schools, focusing on competency-based education and looking to integrate more VR into their training.
Okay, that sounds pretty massive. Why all the secrecy, though?
Well, I guess they're keeping it under tight wraps for now, but apparently it's a big deal.
Wow. Wait, why is it a big deal?
Well, so all of these VR sim companies are building downloadable games as simulations that aren't really intended to tackle competency-based education. So it's like the first one.
Okay, so other companies are trying to gamify patient care, but this doesn't sound like a game at all. How do we find out more?
Well, apparently the only real way to get the full picture is to visit vrpatients.com and book a private demo. They're planning to unveil it to those who are genuinely interested, one-on-one.
All right, you had me at whispers. So I just go to vrpatients.com and book a demo?
Yep. Go to vrpatients.com and book your demo.